everyone, welcome back to the Journey Note Real Talk. Today we're diving into a conversation that affects millions of careers, countless teams, and yet still doesn't get talked about it nearly enough in the open space, menopause. For many people, it arrives with questions, confusion, unexpected shifts in confidence, energy, and identity. And for workplaces, it can quietly shape performance, retention, leadership, and culture in ways most organizations are only just beginning to understand. So, this episode is about bringing the reality into the room. I'm thrilled to be joined by two incredible women today who bring both expertise and lived experience to this conversation. Let's welcome them. Hi, Claire. Hi, Sally. Thank you so much for joining me today. Can you share with our audience a bit about yourself and how you got into this menopause world?
Thank you for inviting me onto the podcast today. It's lovely to be with you all and talking about this really important subject of menopause. So I'm Sally Sidani-Wilkinson. I'm a registered health coach and menopause wellbeing practitioner. How I got into this space really was because of my own lived experience. So I had a 20-year career in marketing and I was looking for what my next move in career looks like. I knew I had a passion for nutrition and food and fitness, and I wanted to do something rewarding, something where I can really make a difference. And so I found this health coaching course which ticked all my boxes because it takes a naturopathic holistic view of improving health. In parallel to doing my training, I also started with what I now know are perimenopause symptoms, but I didn't know that at the time. I started struggling with all sorts of different symptoms. I was really worried and scared about my health, actually. It was quite a scary time. I've never even heard the word perimenopause. And it was only later through people like Davina McCall, Mariella Fostrop, all these fantastic ambassadors for menopause who were finally talking about it in the open space that I joined the dots and I realized that it was perimenopause that I was going through. So I managed to get help and support myself. I can't take HRT for medical reasons, so I was looking for a natural holistic alternative. And through my own research and also going through a nutritionist, I managed to eliminate all of my symptoms through nutrition and lifestyle. And it was really that inspired me to want to give back, so I managed to eliminate my symptoms and I was like, why is not more people talking about this? We need to be talking about menopause and solutions for improving symptoms more openly. I could see all my friends struggling. I could see other people in the workplace struggling. And I'm like, I want to be able to help these people. So that's really why I retrained and qualified to become a menopause wellbeing practitioner. Set up the business nearly 5 years ago now. And so I do one-to-one work. So working with women who are going through perimenopause and menopause, helping them to balance their hormones, working on liver support so that they can feel more balanced and to improve their symptoms. And then also I work in the corporate space because, again, I identified that nobody was talking about menopause at work. And yet it had a significant impact on everybody in the workplace. We'll go into that in more details in a moment. But, I think it was very much still a taboo subject. Nobody was talking about it. And yet people were leaving organisations and taking sick leave in their droves. So that's what really sort of gave me the idea that we need to do menopause support in the workplace. So now I offer education and awareness sessions for all employees, all genders, all ages. I think it's really important that everybody gets a good understanding of what menopause is and how it affects people, how you can support them. And then for people who are going through the menopause, I also support them with a naturopathic approach to improving their symptoms. My business is Rebalanced by Sally.
What a journey. Thank you so much, Sally. That is really inspiring and very interesting as well. I really look forward to hearing more about your experience with menopause overall and what you have seen as well from your experience working in, the corporate world and with your clients. And our amazing guest, Claire, welcome back to the Journey Note podcast.
Thank you for having me back again. And one of my favourite subjects, I have to say, something that I'm living and breathing as we speak. So I'll introduce myself. So as Thao said, my name is Claire Dreyer. I'm a performance coach, and I support women with their confidence, their visibility and their presence in the workspace and out of the workspace. So I have a 12-week program called the She Fit Mental Strength Solution. And along with that as well, I'm a personal trainer, because from my own experience living with endometriosis, I know that fitness, holistic well-being and nutrition are such key fundamentals to help us get through the journeys that us women experience through life.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Claire. And I can't wait any longer. Let's start our podcast and let's talk about menopause. Today, I'm really excited. I'm very curious, and I'm completely a newbie in this space. I haven't got much of the knowledge about menopause. I really want to learn more about this because I've seen my mom, my friends, my colleagues go through this, and I really want to, understand how I can support them. Also, in the future, once it comes, I will know how to handle menopause as well, because I think from my very limited knowledge, menopause, experience is different to each person. Let's start with the basic. What is menopause in very simple terms?
So menopause itself is actually a single day in time. So it's when a person hasn't had a period for 12 consecutive months. So it's actually just one day that we call menopause. The time before that, where people start to have declining and fluctuating hormones, and often get symptoms, we call perimenopause. And then anything after that single day in time, we call that postmenopause. So I think, so often we talk generically about menopause, and then when we say menopause, we are sort of talking all encompassing. It's perimenopause and postmenopause. Anytime where people have got these fluctuating hormones and they're experiencing symptoms. But yeah, as you said, Thao, it's like everybody has a different experience of it. Some people don't get any symptoms, but for 75% of people, they do get symptoms. And 25% of women, they can be severe and debilitating symptoms.
You mentioned symptoms there, Sally. What are the symptoms for, the three phases?
So symptoms, again, they vary. There's actually over 40 different symptoms.
Oh, wow.
And I know we're learning about new symptoms all the time, but over 40 different symptoms. So everybody will have a different experience. They'll experience menopause at a different age, for different severity, for a different length of time, and different symptoms, which is why I always sort of encourage people to track their symptoms and sort of make a diary of what they're experiencing, when, how severe, so that you've got some, a tangible document to take to either your workplace to discuss your symptoms, or to take to your GP to discuss medical support, or to a natural practitioner as well, and a naturopathic practitioner as well, who will be able to help you. So when I talk about the symptoms, let's talk about first of all why we get the symptoms. Well, it's basically declining and fluctuating sex hormones. So that's our estrogen, our progesterone, and our testosterone. And it's not this sort of linear, steady decline. Is actually fluctuating greatly. And it's because of this fluctuation, particularly with estrogen, that we get this almost like roller coaster of emotions, a roller coaster of different symptoms. So you'll see, if you ever look at a chart of estrogen levels, it really does fluctuate greatly throughout the day, throughout the week, throughout the month. Same with progesterone. Now, progesterone declines slightly more steadily, and testosterone is, again, it's much more steady decline, but particularly estrogen is this really a roller coaster of different hormone imbalances. So they can all cause different symptoms. So estrogen, we have 400 different functions in the body supported by estrogen. So that's when our estrogen is declining, it can affect the whole body. It can cause emotional symptoms, physical symptoms, and psychological symptoms. So for some people, it might be more physical symptoms. So things like having skin problems, hair problems. It might be joint aches and pains, muscle aches and pains. For some people, it might be more emotional symptoms. So things like irritability, mood swings. It might be psychological problems. Very common, people get memory loss, brain fog. Again, it really does depend on the individual, which is why it's really important that everybody, all genders, all ages, sort of understand what these different symptoms are and start to sort of recognize some of these symptoms. If we think about, particularly in those early phases, how do people know that they're starting with their perimenopause? Usually the first symptom is change in nature of your periods. So your periods might become lighter or heavier than before. They might become longer in number of days or shorter in number of days than before. They might become more frequent or less frequent than before. That's usually the first sign of, perimenopause, and when you sort of start to notice, okay, my body is shifting now. Other sort of early symptoms of perimenopause tend to be sleep disturbances. So either struggling to get to sleep or waking up at 3-4 o'clock in the morning, not being able to get back to sleep. The mood swings, that's very common in the sort of early stages of perimenopause. One minute you're fine and stable and having a great day, and the next minute you're feeling low or anxious, or the rage, that's very common. I had that really bad. You just feel this sort of rage rising in you that you just can't control, and that's because of your hormones. So those are sort of typically some of the early signs, but as I say, every person does have a different experience, and there's over 40 different symptoms.
It's so funny you say that, Sally, because like you're saying, there's so many that you're reeling off, so many different symptoms. And like yourself, I've had these conversations with my girlfriends, and we're like, well, do you get that? No, but I get this. And there's not two people that are having the same experience or having the same symptoms. But earlier on, that sometimes yours were more physical symptoms, whereas mine's been more an emotional feeling, and the way I've been feeling, and it's slightly different because I went into surgical menopause, so it was a completely different experience from this kind of slow, gradual menopausal experience. But for me, what hit me the most was anxiety. I mean, I've never been an anxious person in my entire life, so to all of a sudden be met with something like that is utterly crippling. And when we talk about the menopause in the workplace, and then we're going to dive into it a little bit deeper in a moment, but to have that feeling of anxiety and to have that kind of, it's almost like an out of body experience, because you don't quite understand why you're feeling it, and you're kind of this feeling inside, but your logical mind is not even giving you the information, and sometimes you don't even know how to present yourself anymore because you're just have this overwhelm of anxiety, and it's very hard to present yourself, especially when you're in a leadership or a senior management position.
Wow, that sounds really scary to me. As a person who hasn't even gone through giving birth, and I'm like, that sounds really scary. Well, so
I think that's why, we want to talk about it, and why we're both so passionate about raising awareness of what menopause is and, what signs to look out for, because, our generation, we're the first generation where we're actually talking about our menopause experience so that we can help the next generation, so that they don't fear it, they don't feel scared of it, they have knowledge, because knowledge is power, so that when you do get to your perimenopause, you're really prepared for it, and it shouldn't be something we're scared of. I don't want people to think that it is a scary thing. If you know what you're going through, you know what to expect, you prepare for it, then it shouldn't be a scary thing. And we're learning all the time. Thank goodness we are sort of advancing, we're getting more budgets and things for research. So by the time the next generation does get to perimenopause, there'll be a lot more understanding and research, so that it doesn't feel as scary, and hopefully there's more solutions coming through.
No, you're totally right, Sally. I mean, I remember when I was having my period, I would know that I was due to have my period, because all of a sudden I would have this kind of Jekyll and Hyde personality, and I'd be thinking everything would wind me up. The children would drive me insane. My ex-husband would drive me mad. And it's like a fiery furnace that was just starting to burn up. So that's how I remember thinking, oh my God, actually, then I look at my ovulation and think, that's the reason why my periods come in. So you have that sort of pre-menstrual kind of tension, that stress, and you have this kind of feeling of rage. But again, everybody's so different. You were saying there, Sally, that you've experienced this rage. I haven't experienced that in my menopausal journey. I'm definitely lacking the testosterone. That's one, we have a very small part of testosterone compared to the male. But I have to say, since going through surgical menopause, I can definitely feel that I've lost that. Before having my surgery and having the hysterectomy, I got a lot of my testosterone from working out, from whether it was lifting heavy, strength training. I would feel this kind of boost, like, yeah, okay, I've got this. It gave me so much resilience. And then all of a sudden, you know, having a radical hysterectomy after sort of 6, 7, 8 weeks before I went on to any hormone replacement therapy, feeling like I just did not know myself anymore. I didn't have any vavavoom. That's how I felt. I felt the vavavoom was just bloody gone. And again, it's like, what is going on here? It's again, it sounds scary, Thao, the way I'm describing it, but it was scary because it's for me, it's like an out of body experience. But however, as Sally is saying, the education now, and everything that we are learning and developing, and we're more and more curious, this will hopefully be handed to you with a nice little ribbon on saying, there you are.
Yeah.
This is how to manage it.
And that's the biggest thing I hear from every client who comes to me is I just want to feel like myself again. You know, they're not asking for miracles. They just want to feel like themselves again. It's like, as you say, it's like an out of body experience, isn't it? You're like, what is happening to my body?
It's really interesting. One common thing I would say that's running, the thread that's running through all of my friends that are going through this in different stages is joy. Where has joy gone? The simple pleasures that you could have joy from, whether it's a beautiful sunrise, a sunset, you might having coffee from my favorite, you know, cup and saucer. Simple joy. It's hard to find that. This is what I found so unusual of going through the menopause, and it can be quite sad. So you almost have to, you know, you have to work a little bit harder to kind of, you know, get that kind of momentum going in, to get that joy and that lightheartedness back again.
Yeah, but it's that self-awareness, isn't it? You know, I think because we are experiencing this, it's learning to listen to your body. You know, you've got very good self-awareness from what you were just saying there, and that's what I sort of do encourage people to do is, you know, use this as an opportunity to as a reset, really. You know, yes, it's going to happen to all of us. All of us go through menopause, so let's try and see the positives in that by using this as a, you know, an opportunity to think about what does the second half of my life look like, from whether it's a career perspective or whether that's from a health perspective. And, you know, I always encourage my clients to listen to their bodies, you know, because symptoms are actually your body talking to you, your body screaming to you. And it might be because there's, you know, a nutrient deficiency, a vitamin deficiency. It might be because your life is too sedentary. You're not moving your body enough. So, you know, all those little signs and symptoms are actually great to listen to and can improve your health, not only through your menopause, but set you up for a long, healthy life as well.
Yeah, so true. I think many things you say there, Sally, as our coaching is very, very similar, whether it's in terms of my like performance and mindset coaching, but also with my personal training. You know, the kind of strength training has to become an absolute non-negotiable when you're going through perimenopause, or that fall in estrogen and the muscle loss that you're experiencing. All of that strength does decline. So all these things that you can be proactive and have that awareness, knowing what's going to benefit you, is super, super important.
Yeah, no, definitely.
I love that there's so much wisdom there, and I'm keen to hear more. So I think I will come to my next favorite question, and I think the audience are also eager to hear this as well. So, at what age does menopause usually start? And for yourself, what was your experience with menopause?
So in terms of age, as we sort of mentioned, everybody will be different. So the average age in the UK is 51 for menopause. So that's the 12 consecutive months of no period. That day we call menopause. The average age is age 51. Most people will reach menopause between the ages of 45 and 55. However, there's no one size fits all when it comes to menopause. You'll hear that throughout whatever we're saying the whole of this episode, is that every person is different. So there are people who experience it in their teens, 20s, 30s, 50s, 60s. Every person is different. And there's people, you know, like Claire mentioned her experience of menopause, surgical menopause. So there are people who are under the age of 40, about 1% of women, who will go through it early. And that might be because of surgery. So it might be because of things like hysterectomy, so removal of ovaries. It might be because of treatments, so things like chemotherapy, radiotherapy, they can all trigger an early menopause, as well as naturally. You know, there have been people in their 20s and 30s reaching perimenopause a lot earlier than the average age as well. So as I said before, it's like really important to listen to your body, track your symptoms, and ask for help and advice if you do sort of suspect that you are reaching perimenopause. So in terms of age, it's hard to know because I'd never even heard the word perimenopause. So never mind know what the symptoms were. I think it was in my early 40s when I sort of look back and thinking about my mood instability and some of the rage and my periods becoming less frequent, that sort of thing. I think it was probably in my early 40s I experienced that. In my mid 40s, I had a hysterectomy. So that was removal of the womb and ovaries. So I then went through a surgical menopause. So I know for sure I am now post-menopause. But yeah, so my own experience in my early 40s, my first sort of symptoms were things like my gut health problems. So it's very common to get food intolerances, to get bloating, to get allergies. So that was my sort of first experience with these sort of gut health challenges. My hair started thinning and falling out. That was quite scary. You know, I was getting clumps of hair falling out in the shower and I'm like, what is happening here? And I thought it was something more sinister. Eczema, I hadn't had eczema since I was a child and that returned. You know, again, I think it's probably all related to the gut health and stress. So we're much more sensitive to stress as we go through perimenopause and menopause as well. So stress can be a trigger for some of these things like eczema, like food intolerances. All sorts of sort of physical symptoms, as well as like the rage, the emotional instability. Those were sort of my first signs. But as I say, because I didn't know I was going through it, it was like actually I can't pinpoint the actual time that I went through it. I didn't really have hot flushes until a lot later. So the hot flushes and night sweats came a lot later into that, probably 2 or 3 years into my perimenopause. That's another thing to note that we haven't talked about is the length of time. So for some people, their perimenopause might be a number of months. For some people, it's years, and some people it's for decades. So my own experience, because I had, you know, my ovaries removed then, including that period, I was probably about 6 years, including post-menopause, where I experienced symptoms. I'm out the other side now, so there is hope, and I like to tell people that it's like actually very liberating to come out the other side. Gives you a new lease of life. So that was sort of my experience. We can talk later in terms of my clients and being in the corporate space, and I think not understanding menopause earlier had some knock-on impacts in terms of me as a manager as well, but we'll come on to that later when we're talking about the workplace.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Sally. That's quite scary, like hair falling out. That would freak me out because that can mean so many things that I will think of something else. That's not menopause.
Yeah, mine hasn't been as prolonged as that. I have lived with endometriosis all my adult life. This played a huge part in my health. When Sally was talking about gut health, this is when I realized that I had a problem. So what had affected me was endometriosis had infiltrated its way into my bowel, causing a blockage. So over the years, I've had several laparoscopies to have the endometriosis shaved away as much as possible. One laparoscopy, I had my left ovary removed. In 2022, I had a large 16 centimetre cyst removed, which left me bedridden, and I didn't have the ability to walk for about 3 weeks. So in terms of women's health, I've had lots and lots of challenges. With the most recent one with the cyst, it was inevitable that even though I was trying to manage the symptoms as holistically as possible through strength training and a very clean and very Mediterranean diet, it was inevitable that I would have to have major surgery. So I had the cyst removed, and then I moved to Dubai, and I had to find myself a consultant who could take on my care after leaving the UK. And I found this most incredible consultant in Dubai, Dr. Marlene Murabek. And she, bizarrely, actually was one of the consultants at the Luton and Dunstable Hospital, where I was born and where I had my first surgery, my first laparoscopy for endometriosis. It was quite bizarre that, you know, I would find this incredible woman who was, well, she gave me the most amazing care, and she really understood women's health. So whilst I was in Dubai and in the corporate world, and I was managing a large team and a very important role, I had a radical hysterectomy. So that's everything going: fallopian tubes, wombs, cervix, the whole shebang. And on top of that, I had my bowel resectioned as well to remove the blockage. So I underwent surgery for 8 hours. After coming through that, I was optimistic. I knew that I was going to be going into surgical menopause, but I didn't want to do too much reading about it. And the reason why is because I'm somebody who does have great intuition and very, very aware of my body. So I read what I needed to know, but I wanted my body to adjust naturally as much as possible to what I had just experienced. And I realise now that over sort of the recovery period of maybe sort of between sort of 4 to 6 weeks, I noticed huge changes in myself. When I spoke earlier on about anxiety, this is what my experience was with surgical menopause. All of a sudden, I didn't feel like myself anymore. And it was very difficult because I was living on my own in Dubai, in an incredible job for an amazing company. But I have to say, you know, I was wearing a bit of a mask for a time, because I remember going into my consultant after having my post-operative meeting with her, and I sat there and I just cried. And I said to her, I just don't know what's wrong with me. And she'd got to know me over the last kind of like 4 months before I was having my surgery. And she just took one look at me and immediately said, God, Claire, we need to get you onto some hormone replacement therapy. You know, she knew it instantly from just my demeanor, but I just wasn't the same woman. And I've got a lot of mental resilience. I build my mental resilience through many things. I challenge myself. I also do my strength training as well. And this is where I've had to dig the deepest to try and pull myself back up again from going through this experience. I went on to progesterone and the estrogen gel. I'm always going to have to be on progesterone, because even though I've had major surgery, they couldn't remove all of the endometriosis. So taking the progesterone just keeps it at bay. And now I'm on a gel where I used to have 2 pumps prescribed, and I put them on my legs. And, you know, over a matter of a couple of months, I started to feel myself again. But there's so many changes in the brain fog that people talk about. And then this is the most bloody frustrating thing, because the way I describe it is how I used to think in my brain. If somebody wanted a piece of information from me, I could just go, it's like pulling out like a filing cabinet. I'd just pull it out a little bit and go, beep, there you are, there's the information. But now if somebody asks me a piece of information, it's like you're pulling out a filing cabinet, and it's just endless. It keeps coming out and keeps coming out, keeps coming out. And the file that you need to give that information is right at the very, very back. And you're trying to find it and pull it out. And you feel like the whole process is taking such a long period to just give somebody an answer. That breeds anxiety as well. So that has been my experience. And for me, it was a life-changing experience, because I did leave the corporate world, and it made me even more of an advocate to empower women. And that's what I'm doing today in my coaching practice.
What a journey, really, when I'm hearing.
It was a long one, sorry.
No, I just like, how did you handle all those things, really? And I did have a question that, you know, how has menopause changed you? You already, your story already answered that. Like, you know, mostly. What is at the end of the tunnel? So when you guys now are on the other side, what is it like compared to pre-menopause period?
I think it's really liberating. I think, you know, both from a practical point of view, there's no more periods, so that's a positive. But you know, from a second, we call it the second spring. I think it's a Japanese expression. You know, menopause is our second spring, which is a really positive way of looking at it. It's not all doom and gloom. It's actually spring. It gives you hope, and spring is full of beautiful opportunities. So I think you know, that's the way I sort of like to look at it and think about the second half of my life, really. And I've retrained, we've both retrained, we've both set up our own businesses, we've both had complete career pivots, met a lot of people through it. And my new career in terms of being a health coach, helping other people to manage their menopause symptoms, to improve their health for the long term, is extremely rewarding. And that really gives me that glow inside, which maybe I wouldn't have got if I hadn't been through the menopause. I think it does sort of change your perspective. It certainly made me wake up to, I need to look after my body. I think in your 20s, maybe to an element, your 30s, you sort of take your health for granted a bit. And, you're a bit reckless with what you're eating, drinking. You look guilty there, Thao. But I think, when you do have these sort of health changes, health scares, it really makes you realise that health is everything. Health is wealth. Health is everything. Without your health, you're nothing. So I think it does make you realise how important it is to look after your body, put nourishing foods into your body, keeping fit, moving the body, look after your self-care, your mental health and your self-care, taking time out to rest and sleep properly. I think all of this is a learning that I maybe wouldn't have had if I hadn't been through the menopause and had sort of the health challenges that I did have.
Yeah. I agree with you there, Sally. I think when you say it's like a springtime for you, I feel like I'm coming out of the winter. I'm coming into the springtime. I think I would say the last 18 months have been a big challenge. And when I came back from Dubai and I came back to the UK and I had to get my medication, my prescription repeated, I thought I better just touch base with my UK GP and bring them up to speed on everything. And I remember that I was still having these sort of anxiety moments. But what I did is, like you spoke earlier, it's about inner reflection, because I don't want menopause to become confusing with just everyday life challenges. I was coming back, I was relocating back to the UK. That in itself is a bloody enormous task. I'd left the corporate world. I became, set up my own coaching business and became a personal trainer. I've done all this kind of stuff in the last sort of 12 months. And so I just took stock for a moment, just to myself, say, do you know what? Maybe it's not menopause. Maybe it's just, there's a lot going on in my life right now. And it's going to, of course, all of these things, I feel a little bit unsettled. So I think it's having that awareness. I did increase my dosage on the estrogen just to give myself that little bit more support that I needed whilst I was going through this kind of like transition of moving back to the UK, just to manage things a little bit easier. But as the kind of person I am, I want to do things as holistically as possible. So I'll start to reduce that again. But, I'm such an advocate of fitness, because it's supported me no end in everything, both physical and my mental health. And now I'm training people. I'm personal training at David Lloyd in Milton Keynes. And, we talk about like life and balance and things like that. You're right. We do want to, I think our bodies want to kind of eat more nutritious food and give ourselves a little bit more self-care. These are all things that are going to help us. But, equally, it's still nice to, have the balance. If you want that glass of wine, if that's what you want, that's great as well. I don't feel like there should be any hard, fast rules for everybody. I think it's having that self-awareness. But going back to just want to touch base on personal training. I'm sharing my experience with clients, because strength training will help you maintain and build that lean muscle, which obviously is decreasing, which in turn will support your metabolism. It will support your posture, your energy, and give you that independence. And don't forget as well, we need to touch upon things like bone density, because bone density is at a higher risk. And when we're lifting weights, this is, it's going to support us, and it will lower the risk of anything like osteoporosis or something like that. Massive advocate of women going through strength training at the moment. Is a big thing. The people that I'm meeting in the gym, they are reading, so it's wonderful. They're becoming educated on the things that are being supported. You mentioned Davina McCall earlier on. These kind of amazing advocates who are shouting about the things that you can do positively to help you get through this lovely journey.
I love what you're saying there in terms of, the bone health. I think, so there's certain things which we don't talk about a lot when we talk about menopause, in terms of things that we need to be looking about, because I think we focus a lot on the symptoms, but we also need to focus on things like bone health, as you mentioned, like we lose bone densities, we lose our estrogen, heart health as well. Heart health needs to be looked after, so that can be through other forms of exercise, and also through nutrition. Muscle health, we lose muscle mass as we age. So is that all these, the metabolism slows, all these different things due to declining hormones, but also because of age, that, going through menopause, as I said before, right, this is a time for a reset. This is a time to reflect and think about, okay, all these aspects of my health, what can I put in place to help to support that? I agree with you. It's definitely about finding balance. We want to enjoy the second half of our lives. It's about 80-20. I always say to my clients, it's about 80-20. So 80% of the time you're, feeding yourself with delicious, nutritious food, and you're working out, doing the strength training. 20% of the time, have those treats, but treat them as treats rather than those sort of everyday things.
Yeah, absolutely that. Amen to that.
When you compare pregnancies versus menopause, because both of them, do changes to our bodies and our hormone and our emotion roller coaster, right? How do they feel to you, all the changes you experience during pregnancies? Are they as severe as menopause? Or I know you say that there's no one size fits all, but how did it go for you guys?
I think when you think about pregnancy and menopause, you get a prize at the end of it. Okay, so when you're pregnant, you're going to get yourself a beautiful child. And as Sally said, when you get to the end of the menopause, you've got a spring in your step and you're starting the next chapter of your life. So for me, you've got a prize in both chapters.
Yeah, I think it's just like, as a woman, we have to go through so many changes, right? Like, going through when we're teenager, we start having period, and then when we go through pregnancies, we have to go through all kind of changes in our bodies, and then menopause comes, right? And so that you can see how strong women are to go through all those while still, working. So I think to wrap up this part of the podcast, what is the one advice that you would give to someone who is going through menopause based on your experience?
I think it's understanding your options, because I think, that's something which was lacking for our generation who have been through it or going through it now. I think, because we didn't learn about it at school, because we didn't talk to friends about it, because we didn't learn from our mothers or grandmothers. I think, for your generation, for the next generation, it's understanding your options, because there are, now fortunately that we're finding out from research all the time new things that can help with menopause symptoms. So, understand what's available to you in terms of HRT, because there's different formats of HRT, whether that's gels, patches, sprays, tablets. Then you've got the holistic approach. Some people like to do it through breath work, acupuncture, herbalists, nutrition, movement and exercise, detoxing. So it's really understanding your options available to you and finding a path that suits you. So again, it's like, listen to your own body and find what's right for your own body, and don't let anybody else tell you what's right for your body. Somebody tries to force you down one particular route, really take a step back and think about what's right for you. It's your body, and it's therefore your choice of how you do approach your menopause years.
Like a complete agreement there. I'm nodding everything you're saying, Sally, 100%. Understanding your options and going what's right for you. We've spoken about a lot during the episode about awareness, and it's reflecting awareness, how you're feeling in yourself. Even if you want to journal it, write it down. Sally said earlier on, start writing down your symptoms or things that keep reoccurring. I mean, these are great tips for you to be able to go to a GP. But explore your options. As Sally said, the GPs don't hold all the information anymore. There's so much more out there.
Yeah.
So yeah, do your research and find what's best for you.
I think the important thing to note as well, because a lot of people will be in their 20s and 30s listen to this. It's never too early to start preparing. So if you can, get your nutrition right and your fitness levels and your self-care right in your 20s and 30s, you can actually prevent some symptoms later in life when you do get to perimenopause, or you might have less severe symptoms later as well. So thinking about your nutrition earlier in life, and looking at the Mediterranean diet, looking at whole food diet, trying to reduce your ultra processed foods, making sure you're moving your body throughout the day, the strength training that Claire talked about. If you can just start to gradually build in some of these as becoming healthy habits in your life, and they just become part of your daily routine, by the time you do get to perimenopause, it's not a sudden life change. It's just always been part of your routine, and you're ready and you're prepared, and you can actually, as I say, reduce severity of symptoms by doing that.
Because you're giving yourself the tools already to be able to manage that. So for me now, I'm finding that I'm seeing clients who are empty nesters. So before that time, when you're a mother and you're working, if you're working, where they have a career, any type of job, but you're raising a family, a lot of the time, we aren't our priority. Our children are our priority, our jobs are our priority, and you put yourself very low down. So, what I'm seeing now with some of my clients who are a similar age to myself is being empty nesters, starting to go through the menopause. So these are two huge changes that they're experiencing. We've spoken about how the menopause can, question your identity. But, if you're an empty nester and your children have left university or starting their own lives and living elsewhere, you're also questioning what is my purpose again. So this is why right now I'm really enjoying with these type of women in my coaching program, but also the ones that I'm training in the gym as well.
And it's an opportunity to put yourself first, isn't it? If
yes,
it really is a time where you have to think about, okay, I need to put myself first now. This is a time for me, and carving out, even if it's 10 minutes a day, just carving out some time for yourself. And what does that look like? You might like reading, or you might like having a bath before bed, or you might like going to the gym or meeting up with friends, whatever it is that is self-care for you, and an opportunity to prioritize yourself, then now is the time to do it. It really will help with your stress management, your cortisol levels. It will help with your symptoms, and learn to delegate as well. I think as women, busy women, we're not very good at that. We take on a lot. So learning to say no to things and learning to delegate is a powerful thing.
Now I do understand why Sally said that this is the second spring, because actually it's like when you're back to your 20s, or like teenagers, like before you have kids, basically, right? You have all the time for yourself, and you're gonna be the first number one priority of your life, compared to when you have kids, when you have family. Then obviously most of the time that we're going to become at least the second or even lower priority.
I really just do. I want women to feel empowered. Okay, this is really important, to feel empowered, that even though they're going through this change, and like I said to you, describe empty nesters to going through the menopause, it is a particularly challenging time. This is what I'm getting from women that I'm talking to. But let it be a time when you can reinvent yourself. Okay, and this is my expertise. Let me help you.
I think moving on to the next part about menopause in the workplace, and I think it kind of touched on the point that you just mentioned, Claire, around people's perspectives. Menopause is often talked about as a woman's issue in the workplace, but how does it actually impact the organizations overall and teams from your own experience?
Yeah, I think that is something which I hear a lot, is that menopause is a women's issue. No, it's not. It's everybody's issue. It's a workplace issue. It's an organizational issue. It affects everybody. Everybody knows somebody who is going through menopause or will be going through menopause, whether that's your mother, your daughter, your sister, work colleague, your boss, or direct report. It really does affect everybody. In fact, it affects the bottom line. I think everybody throughout the organisation, certainly at board level, they're looking at profitability, and they might think that menopause or well-being doesn't affect the profitability, but it absolutely does. If people are taking sick leave, if people are leaving the business, and you have to you're losing extremely valuable talent. You know, these are people who have been in these positions for years, decades, had a lot of experience, a lot of knowledge, a lot of talent, and you're losing them from the organization. You've got to replace them, you've got to recruit, you've got to train, and that's a huge implication, financial implication on the organization. Or people who are taking sick leave, of course, that has a cost implication. So, you know, when we talk about menopause and helping with well-being and the health of women going through the menopause, it affects the bottom line at the end of the day, not just the well-being initiatives. Even work performance, you know, if somebody is struggling with symptoms and not getting support, they're not going to be engaged, they're not going to be performing to the best of their abilities, they're not going to be able to focus and concentrate at work, you know, they're not going to be creative, they're going to find it difficult making decisions. All this sort of knock-on impact affects the business performance at the end of the day. But if they are getting support with their symptoms through, you know, flexibility, through workplace adaptations, through help with their health, you know, through nutrition, fitness, etc., all of these things you can do, which don't cost a lot of money, are going to have a positive impact on business performance and profitability as well. I think it's really important that everyone from the CEO throughout the organization has a really good understanding of what it is, what the signs and symptoms are to look for, how does it impact people in the workplace, and how can you support? Because we know from the data, 1 in 10 women leave the work because of menopause symptoms, because they're not getting support in the workplace. And 1 in 5 women are having to take sick leave because of symptoms. And quite often, because there's still such a taboo and embarrassment and awkwardness in the workplace talking about menopause, often people will take sick leave and give another reason for their sick leave. So they're more likely to say, I've got a hangover, than they are to say that I'm going through the menopause, I need a day off because I haven't slept. So,
yeah, you know, people don't understand that, do they? They don't, you know, they don't understand that you can have, you know, these symptoms of menopause can make you feel that, you know, unable to work. You know, but if you give an excuse, say you've got a hangover, people think, oh, okay, whatever, you know, or a cold, that kind of thing.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. But yeah, so it really does impact everybody. You know, if you've got one of your team members who's going through the menopause and they've, you know, got some of the symptoms that we were talking about earlier, you know, maybe they haven't slept at night, so they're coming into work feeling exhausted, or if they're, you know, they've lost their confidence and they're feeling anxious and they're meant to be giving a presentation, you know, that can be really difficult for somebody. Or if they're struggling with joint aches and pains, you know, if they've got a sitting down office job, that can be really uncomfortable. Or if they're, you know, working on their feet all day, and they're struggling with sweats, you know, hot sweats or something, you know, something like that, being on your feet all day, feeling fatigued, having a hot sweat in front of male colleagues, all of these things can be really difficult to be able to function to the best of your abilities. You know, we want to be on our A game. As Claire said earlier, you know, a lot of people going through menopause are at the pinnacle of their careers, and yet they're like, these symptoms are forcing them to take a step backwards. But it doesn't have to be like that. You know, I think with the right support, both in terms of their own sort of health support that we were talking about earlier, but also workplace support and workplace adaptations, it doesn't have to be like that. People don't have to leave their jobs. People can operate to, you know, bring their A game and operate to the best of their abilities. But it takes the whole organisation and the whole cultural change to get to that point.
Yeah, it's a big change, isn't it? Like you said, you're touching then, you know, this is the pinnacle of most women's careers. You're going through the menopause, but you've worked up your corporate career over the last 20 to sort of, you know, 25 years, and then you're at that stage, you know, that you've been working and, you know, hard slog over all the years, and the late nights, missing the kids' Christmas performance at school because you've been, you know, conscientious and want to work you up the corporate ladder, and now you're finding yourself in this experience where, you know, you're questioning yourself. So I mean, we touched upon earlier about my experience and how in the Middle East, women's health is not discussed at all. It's still very much a taboo subject. And when I had my hysterectomy in Dubai, I was invited by the hospital to go and do an interview with them and share my experience to highlight to local Emiratis about women's health. In reflection and from my experience, I wish now that I probably had reached out even more to the corporation that I worked for. And Sally, that you shared upon that the UK seemed to be a little bit more advanced than, you know, maybe the Middle East in terms of menopause, women's health, that kind of thing?
Yeah, from my experience, I've got some global clients, and from my experience, the UK seems to be more advanced in terms of the awareness and education, both in the workplace and also in the homes. I think, some countries are catching up. I think Australia does a great job. US is starting now, Europe starting now, but certainly I think, because we have got so many fantastic ambassadors in the UK, I think, UK really is leading it, which is great, but we need to do more.
Yeah.
There's so much work that needs to be done in this space, right? So that is why we have Claire and Sally today to talk about this. What are the common myths about menopause at work that you still hear today, based on your experience?
Some of the myths. I think, we touched on it earlier in terms of, I think there's this perception that if you're going through menopause, you're old, you're not capable of doing your job anymore. And that's absolutely not true. This is a phase of life. It's a natural phase of life that we're all going to go through. All women are going to go through it at some point. And I think, we're not old. We've still got, half of our lives ahead of us for our career and families, and we hope. But also, within the workplace, with the right support, it doesn't have to impact your career. And I think that's really important. It is just a phase. So either you're going to come out the other side, or with the right support and workplace adaptations, you can do your job to the best of the ability. So things like using flexible working policies. If you've had a poor night's sleep, you might want to come into the office a bit later that day, or work from home that day if your company allows that. Or, I talked about people who are standing on their feet all day for their jobs. Maybe they take more regular breaks, or they swap tasks with somebody else for a short period of time when they are having, particularly struggling for the day. There's all sorts of workarounds so people can, have fantastic careers through their menopause, but have the confidence to ask for that help and support. Because nobody else will really know what you're going through or what help you need. So when you do speak to your manager, or if you are a manager being approached by somebody else, I think it's really important to have an idea of what help and support you're looking for, and give some ideas, because then the company know sort of what you're looking for, and they can say yes or no to that, but they can at least have some ideas of what you are specifically looking for.
So what I'm hearing here is it's very important, right, to communicate what you're going through with the company. I think it's important in a sense also as well is to set expectations, right? And I think that is very important. We talk about how individuals can make sure that they get the sufficient support to go through menopause. So, through communication, through the advice that you just talked about earlier, that they need to listen to their body and understand what works best for them, and, reach out to coaches like Sally, like Claire, who are the experts in this area, if they don't have anyone to talk to, right? What can the organizations do to create a culture to, empower people, women going through menopause, to make sure that, menopause is part of the organization's ways of working and culture?
Yeah, sure. So when I work with clients, I sort of break it down into 3 phases. So the first phase is awareness and education. And I think, it really starts with everybody really understanding what the menopause is, how it impacts people in work. And by doing that, by having this understanding, it helps to break down the taboos. It helps to reduce any awkwardness or embarrassment having conversations about menopause. It gives people, and particularly managers, the confidence to have those conversations. Because if you're, a young manager or a male manager, it's probably the first time you've ever talked about menopause. So we really want that sort of cultural change where we normalize those conversations, give people the confidence to have those conversations, and they'll only feel confident if they have the knowledge and understanding of what it is. So I think that sort of education piece has to come first. And with that, then you will get the start of that cultural change. Phase 2 is sort of putting in place policies and guidelines. So we don't want it to be sort of a tick box exercise of, we've got a menopause policy on the intranet. We need that to be policies that people understand, people know where they are, people know how to use them. So these need to be living, breathing documents. And I workshop with my clients to sort of put together guidelines and policies specific to their organisation. And these are places where you can, if somebody's going through menopause and doesn't know what to do, you can signpost them to this policy so they really understand more about menopause and what policies are in place to support them through it. It's also good guidance for managers. So if you are a manager of somebody going through the menopause, then you can go to these policies and guidelines and really understand the steps that you should be taking to support your work colleague through that. So so policies and guidelines is step 2. And then step 3 is really support. And that can be both physical and emotional support. So physical support might be things like if somebody's having hot flushes, they might want to sit near a window, or they might need to have a fan on their desk. Or it might be having a well-being room. You know, if people struggling with anxiety or fatigue or, something low mood, there is a room where people can go to, they can do some meditation, they can do some breath work, just have some quiet time to compose themselves before they go back to work. So a lot of my clients have put these sort of well-being rooms in place. So those are sort of physical ideas of what you can do. And then on the emotional support side, it's really listening. Listen to your colleagues. You might not have the answers. You might not even want to offer answers. But if your direct report or your colleague feels listened to, they feel heard, that can really lighten the load for them. And that in itself reduces their stress. They feel valued as a colleague. They feel like somebody is listening to them. Because when you're going through menopause, particularly if you're working with a lot of men, or if you're working with a lot of younger colleagues, it can be very isolating going through it. You feel like you're on your own. And that's when people tend to either leave the organisation, or they start withdrawing. People who were very sort of outgoing team players, you see them sort of starting to withdraw from team activities and spending more time at home office and that sort of thing. So we want to make sure that people feel heard, and they can sort of ask and can, as you said, and they can communicate how they're feeling and what support they need. So yeah, the emotional support can be having menopause cafes. I facilitate menopause cafes, which are great support groups where women can get together, support each other, ask for advice, share their experiences. Or it might be a buddy system. So if a couple of colleagues who are both going through menopause, you might want to buddy up to support each other. Some of my clients, they put menopause champions in place. So I train them on menopause, and they can be the go-to people, like a train the trainer. So they're the go-to people for menopause in the workplace. So there's all sorts of things that you can do. And I'm happy to have a chat. If anyone does want to sort of put some of these things in place, then I'm happy to have a chat.
That's amazing. I love the ideas about well-being room, menopause coffee chats, all of them. Like when I go through that phase in the future, I would love to have something like that in the company for sure. And I think this question is for both of you. So for example, I am a team member and I have my managers like yourself going through menopause. What kind of support that I can get for, I can help you. And, when you went through menopause, for example, what did you wish your team members do to help you go through that?
I think for me, because again, a surgical menopause is a very different experience. It's quite sudden. So for me, that was kind of unexpected. So it took me by surprise, and I didn't know at that moment what actually I really needed. And what Sally described is a wonderful service, and something that I wish I had access to when I went through it, because I didn't have that support. But I'm not sharing that with you to say that was wrong with the company I work for. I should have been able to ask for it as well. But it wasn't there. So as I think, Thao, when you get into this change of your life, I think it'd be very seamless in terms of communicating and understanding. Yeah. So for me, it was a very different experience. Again, it makes me a brilliant coach, if I don't mind me saying, because I think I have massive understanding of what I've gone through, what women are going through with perimenopause. And not only that, I think it's supporting and educating the clients that I have in my coaching program, because most of them are, new leaders themselves, and sharing with them the experiences that, that I've had, which will make them into, even better understanding and authentic leaders, which is, in my opinion, what we need more of.
As I said, it's just listening, because, a lot of the time it's just having somebody, a safe space where you feel you can talk about your symptoms, talk about what you're going through. So listening, empathy, if one of your colleagues is going through it, just listening to them, empathize, ask them what they want. That's a question I frequently get asked in my workshops, is like, how do I bring up the subject? I can't just ask my colleague if they're going through the menopause. So, just ask them how they're feeling. If you've noticed a difference in somebody, in their mood, or in their approach to work, or in their performance at work, if you've noticed a difference, just ask them how they're feeling, whether it's menopause, whether that's a mental health challenge, whether it's something going on at home. Everybody's going through something. So it just opens up the door for those conversations. And they may want to talk about their menopause, they may not, but at least you've opened the doors, and they feel that they can, you're there if they do want to talk about it. And it just makes them feel more comfortable about doing that. And it might not be you that they want to talk to, but at least have that conversation of, I do need some support, I do need to speak to somebody, because menopause is affecting my work performance. So it just starts those conversations in a relaxed and empathetic way.
Mm-hmm. I think having two sons, and raising my boys, how much I love them, Thao. I've shared with them my experience, because I want them to be better partners and understanding to what a woman does go through. So they haven't, it's me and my experience that I've had, that I want them to understand it. I wanted to protect them from a lot of things that I was experiencing, the severity of surgery, but I think it will make them better partners, and whatever workplace they're in, more understanding, and, as Sally said, empathetic.
We are at the stage of where I think menopause education is very important. I think that needs to be talked about more in the workplace and everywhere, even for our loved ones, right? I think it's also very important to help them and have the conversations with them when they go through this stage, and that's very important. And I love your story, Claire, that you also share all these with your sons as well. What is the one simple action that people can do to make, their loved ones or their colleagues going through menopause feel more supported at work?
I think if you're the person going through it, it's having the confidence to ask for help when you need it, because as we've talked about, it can be scary, it can be isolating, but you're not alone. Every woman will go through this, 50% of the population will go through this. So it's having the confidence to talk about it in the workplace, ask for help when you need it. And if you are a partner, or if you are a work colleague, it's about listening. It's about listening and just having empathy, even if you don't have solutions. To just show empathy and let the person be heard, because that can really help to manage stress.
It's got to be the whole kind of understanding, and being able for them to feel safe to share how they're feeling. So be genuine in asking them, are you okay? And let them feel like they can safely respond and let you know how they're feeling. I don't think that we should be actively going out there and trying to diagnose everybody with menopausal symptoms. That's probably going to rile some menopausal women, I have to say. It's just, biggest awareness. Everything is about awareness.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you both. I would like to hear like a success story that you have experienced where you have successfully helped an organization, Sally, in your case, to implement, menopause educations and guidelines within the organization. And Claire, one of the success story that you have with your client who's, going through menopause. If you don't mind sharing one with me, that would be amazing.
Yeah, absolutely. So if I think about the awareness and education, I was working with a global organization, and we had 2 workshops, and that was for men and women. We did one in the morning for Europe, UK, and then we did one in the afternoon for US, APAC. And at the end of, and we went through, you know, what the signs and symptoms are, how you can support colleagues through it. And at the end of the session, I had two men who gave me feedback. One of the men said, "You've literally saved my marriage. I now understand what my wife is going through."
Wow.
And another man said, "I really feel valued as an employee because my company is putting this service on and paying for this service, that we all understand it. I feel more valued as an employee." So for me, that was just like, you know, my end goal, really. You know, that's exactly what I'm trying to achieve in everything that I do. And then in terms of my sort of health coaching for women who are actually going through the menopause, I do 12-week group coaching within the workplace. So I take cohorts of 10 women at a time. And I had a group of 10 women over this 12-week period. In the first week, I mean, it's a sad story, I had 6 out of 10 of the women were literally in tears because they couldn't cope. They couldn't cope with their work. They couldn't cope with the mental load. They were struggling with their symptoms, struggling to walk up the stairs because of different things, all different stories. These 10 women, 6 of them were literally crying in that first session. We went through this 12-week program. We looked at their nutrition, we looked at their movement and exercise, we looked at stress management tools, we looked at how to improve their sleep, because a lot of them weren't sleeping, and that's having a knock-on impact of their sort of fatigue and other symptoms. And we looked at their sort of detoxification and taking out some toxins of their lifestyle. Over that 12-week period, by our last session in week 12, everybody was smiling, laughing, supporting each other. They've set up a walking club in their lunch times. They were like, one of the ladies who hadn't done crafting for years started crafting again. Another one had her husband who was on this health kit with her, and they were going out for walks after dinner. It was just like, you know, it was just amazing to see the difference in their mood, the difference in their health. And you've done that yourself just through, you know, creating these small healthy habits. It's not like these big expensive things. It's like small little healthy habits you can do week by week, building up step by step, can have such a profound impact on your health and your menopause symptoms. So those are just sort of 2 examples of how we can help, really.
Like 12 weeks, right? Like only 12 weeks, and all of them had, you know, life-changing kind of habits. That's incredible, amazing.
One woman literally, because she was in so much pain, she couldn't walk her dog. By the end of it, she was going for like hour-long walks with her dog, because she's like, yeah, it is amazing what can be achieved, and the human body is amazing. It can heal.
It is, yeah. It is. It's lovely. I was just thinking how nice it is for you to create these communities, Sally, where they feel safe to share their experience. Because I think when we feel safe and not judged by other people, we can relax and we can assess clearly about what we need to do.
Yeah, community is a big part of it, isn't it? You know, just feeling that you're not alone and feeling there's somebody there who's going through the same thing. And yeah, human connection is really important.
It's a massive thing. I think for me with my coaching, that's exactly it. It's human connection. So for me, my experience with one client in particular, where she came from me as an empty nester, looking to not reinvent herself, but looking to go back out into the workplace again. So that's how it started off in terms of coaching. But being at the time in her life where she is going through the menopause, she has got this problem where a lot of us do collect fat around our midriff at this time. So giving her a training program and nutritional needs that she needs to adjust to make more healthy, conscious choices. So with the coaching to give her clarity on where she wants to go, helping her, support her do her CV, with the physical training as well, is a really nice collaboration of the two. But what I do on top of that is I support women with visibility and presence. So it's looking at the woman that you were once, okay, and now the woman that you're becoming. So we've talked about these 2 chapters, haven't we, a lot through this episode. And for me, it's supporting that woman, giving her clarity in her mind, reconnecting her with her body, and giving her the visibility and confidence through her styling identity as well. So her styling identity is something, there's another coaching program that I have, which runs alongside the SheFit program. And this is all about understanding your style identity. So you might want to reinvent yourself into this new chapter of your life. And what does that look like? It can be anything that you want it to be, as long as you're going to get confidence, freedom, and visibility.
Yeah, definitely. I think
Love that.
it's amazing for these two topics, right? There's a lot of things that are hidden, and
Mm,
there are a lot of unwritten rules and people take for granted. So menopause and, visibility, confidence, both of them are so important, but they are still overlooked. They're not talked about enough, and people are still suffering from both of them, right? So I think definitely in this space, there's really a lot more work that needs to be done. And thanks to Sally and Claire who are driving the wave to make sure that we have the knowledge that we need. And I really look forward to more sessions that we will have about menopause so that we can, help people to know about this topic in more details. Thank you so much both for today. I have learned so much, and this has been the Journey Not Real Talk. See you next time.